If you like these videos, please check out my full course at www.lsat.totaltestprep.net with tons of clearly explained actual LSAT questions written by someone who's mastered test and helped others master it, and an evaluation period where you only pay if you want to continue.
Okay, so in this video, we're going to give the introduction to the logic games or the analytical reasoning section. So, what is analytical reasoning? What is the nature of the game section? What does it consist of? What does it test? And how do we approach it? So that's what we'll cover in this video. So, in terms of the basic information, analytical reasoning section is actually unique to the LSAT. It's more commonly or colloquially known as the games section. It's known as the logic game section. And this is the section that tests the organization and management of information and the ability to draw reasonable inferences from it. It's always going to be one of the 4 scored sections. So it'll be one of the 4 scored sections. And you're always going to have 4 short passages, and these are the logic games. This is where the name comes from. You're always going to have 4 short passages known as the logic games, and each game is going to have 5 to 7 questions. So those 4 games and the 5 to 7 questions for each one will be about 22 to 24 questions per section. And so at 35 minutes per section, this gives you 8 minutes, 45 seconds on average per game. Okay, so that's the basic information. Now, in terms of what does it test? Well, so what can you expect to find in the game section? And the instructions that it begins with are that each group of questions in this section is based on a set of conditions, and answering some of the questions, it may be useful to draw a rough diagram. Choose the response that most accurately and completely answers each question and blacken the corresponding space on your answer sheet. So, each passage or each game presents a scenario with elements. These are the conditions that they talk about in the directions above. And these are going to be similar to a logic puzzle, like a brain teaser. So you may be familiar with this if you like doing puzzles, if you like doing brain teasers, kind of visual riddles, that kind of stuff. This is what this is going to be similar to. After the scenario, you'll be given rules that determine the relationships between the elements in that game or in that scenario, and or that puzzle, that scenario. And this is also part of the conditions. This is also what they mean by conditions, but it's easy. It makes sense to break it up into the game or scenario and into the rules. And the questions are going to ask you about the relationships between those elements up in the scenario and between with respect to the rules or the conditions that are given. Okay, now the point of this section is to test your abstract reasoning skills, your ability to look at the elements, to make inferences about the elements, and about the relationships between those elements. Diagrams are useful because the games are essentially the different arrangements that you can make for the elements in the scenario. This is going to make more sense once you get into it, but it's a fairly visual sort of logical test, visual reasoning in some sense. So making diagrams is helpful in terms of recognizing what the different arrangements are. The logic games are all about rules and interconnected information, and this is the connection to the law, is that a law may have lots of different elements that are related in different ways, and appealing to one part of the law has consequences to other parts and to other laws even. And so knowing how the different rules interact is essential to dealing with complex laws, and that's what this section tests. Okay, now that's for what it basically tests. How do we approach it? So you want to recognize that it's a solvable puzzle. So it is a puzzle. It's going to be a brain teaser puzzle type thing, but it's actually a solvable puzzle. You can learn to do it mechanically, and the way that I approach it is very mechanical. So you don't actually have to naturally be good at solving puzzles or deduction. So keep that in mind. It's solvable and it can be learned mechanically. So what do you need to do? You need to learn the fundamental elements of the game. We'll break it up and we'll learn all the different parts. So we'll learn what the different games are. We'll learn what the different questions are. Those are the 2 different fundamental elements, and they each have different elements within them that we'll go into a lot of detail in the upcoming lessons. And then you just put it together on actual games. You basically go and you diagram the games first, and then you train the question types in order, And you're once again basically focused on the approach and not on the timing. And at the very end, you'll put it all together on actual games. Okay, so to quickly summarize, the logic game section is 4 games, each dealing with scenarios that involve different elements and their relationships to one another. The point of this section is to test your abstract reasoning skills with respect to logical consequences and interactions in a complex system. And it will always be one of the 4 scored sections on the test.